Well, alrighty, gang, welcome back to the Gutowski Files, starring our very own Stephen Gutowski. Stephen is the founder and owner, editor-in-chief, and writer over at thereload.com. Stephen, how are you, sir?
Palm pepper spray is next generation OC spray. It's hot at 1.4% major capsaicinoids, and its modular design means you can customize it exactly to you. 3 different setups, lots of different color combinations. You can make it exactly as you like. And the flip top safety prevents accidental discharges. It's 10 to 12 foot range and 25 half-second blasts. Make sure that you can keep that long range eye poke at long range. I trust Palm OC and I recommend it for everyone for self-defense.
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. So a lot has happened since the last time we talked, and then the last time we talked, a lot of it happened between that time and the time before that. So it's like
things keep happening. Yes.
We just 2024, just chill out, would you? Just relax a little bit. We just need a little bit of normalcy would be nice. So the first thing, probably the only thing we're going to talk about today, relates to what we talked about last week. So if you tuned in last week to the Gutowski Files, you would know that Stephen and I discussed the fact that the Republicans have sort of been very quiet, if not silent, on Second Amendment, on gun control related issues. And I wasn't sure it was that big of a deal. But then yesterday, the current vice president and the Democrat candidate for president, Kamala Harris, I don't want to mispronounce her name, came out with some pretty strong statements that are sort of anti-gun or anti-Second Amendment. So I think this matters more than I thought it did a week ago. Stephen wrote an article over at The Reload entitled Kamala Harris Touts Gun Control in First Election Speech. And I just want to read a quick quote before I throw it over to you, Stephen. I'm reading from the article. On Monday, Harris rallied with Democratic campaign staff in Wilmington, Delaware. She laid out her vision for her own potential presidency, which included a number of new gun control laws. She described herself and the campaign staffers as, quote, "we who believe in the freedom to live safe from gun violence," which is just politicianese. I think most people believe we should live in the freedom to be safe from gun violence, but at any rate. And then during the article, Stephen also brought back a quote from 2019 when she was running for president. And I'll read that real quick. Quote, "Upon being elected, I will give the United States Congress 100 days to get their act together and have the courage to pass reasonable safety gun laws," she said in April of 2019. "If they fail to do it, then I will take executive action." So in that statement, if you were paying attention, she infers that the Congress does not have its act together and is not courageous if they don't do the things that she would like them to do, and then goes on to say she's going to take executive action, which I'm not a big fan of executive orders unless it's a really legitimate emergency. But they go back and forth. Democrats and Republicans both do it. Stephen, what do you make of all this?
Yeah, well, I think to finish off the point we were making last week and to emphasize what you just said about the Republican Party, because we recorded before Donald Trump gave his acceptance speech. And he ended up, he has kind of a thing for going on for a long time in these acceptance speeches, but he gave his longest one ever, which I guess was apparently a record in the TV era.
Nobody goes longer than me on a speech. Nobody can do it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so, he talked for quite a while. And the noticeable thing for our purposes was that he didn't mention a single gun policy or the Second Amendment even once in that entire long speech. Even though he mentioned things like Taiwan, for instance, was cut from the platform. They didn't talk about defending Taiwan in the Republican platform this time around, even though they had previously. But he mentioned that in his speech, but not guns. So, it really capped off what we've been talking about on this changing approach that we're seeing from the Republican side. Not that they're changing policy positions necessarily. Trump's not coming out and saying he wants some new gun restriction. He's just not talking about it at all.
Right.
And so you contrast that with the Democrats, who now have an entirely new candidate. I mean, this week, it's only Tuesday, has been pretty wild in the political world. Not only did the president say he was giving up his reelection campaign, which is the first time that's ever happened this late in a cycle.
Unprecedented, yeah.
Yeah. But also, somewhat surprisingly, not totally shocking, but somewhat surprisingly, it appears that Democrats have decided to coalesce totally around Kamala Harris as his replacement. And it does not appear at this moment, although if anything about these last 10 days, I guess, have taught us a lesson, it should be that you never know what the heck is going to happen next here in our politics. So maybe this will change, but it appears like she's going to cruise to becoming the nominee. In fact, I think she's already got enough delegates pledged for switching from Biden to her that she's already got the number she needs at the convention. Now, maybe that changes if somebody jumps in, but a lot of the big name Democrats have already endorsed her.
To jump in, not to get too far afield, but I heard that there's obviously a ton of money in their war chest and their
yeah,
campaign fund, and that money
she
could
raised
be
$100
used,
million in like 24 hours.
right? But the money that pre-existed Joe
Yeah.
Biden dropping out of the race couldn't be tapped into unless at least she was on the ballot in some form or fashion.
Right. Yeah, there was some issue with how what they had in the bank from the Biden campaign, how that would work. There's certainly, they put out the idea that it could only go to Harris because she's on the ticket. I don't know for sure if that's completely true, but it is a little interesting to see them not even try to have some sort of flash primary thing but they coalesced around here super fast is just the point I'm trying to make. Whether that's the ideal outcome or not, we'll probably never know, but yeah. And then what we've seen is Kamala Harris, and I wrote a piece when this first happened, when the president dropped out and endorsed her. She was to the left of Joe Biden in the primary in 2020, and really as both Attorney General of California and a senator from California. She was to the left of Joe Biden on a couple issues, not super to the left of him, just in the sense that like Joe Biden was already pretty well to the left on gun issues. There's not a lot of people in the Democratic Party left that aren't significantly to the left of the country on gun policy at this point. You have like maybe John Tester, right, in Montana, the senator, or Joe Manchin, who I guess isn't even in the Democratic Party anymore.
No, he's not. I believe.
Yeah, I think he's. He's certainly not going to be in the Senate anymore after this. But I don't think he's even a Democrat. But regardless, Harris has historically been a bit to the left of Biden on guns, and so the question I think is going to be over where she ends up if she does win the presidency, and how she's going to run in the meantime. We got a clue on the latter in her first speech that you mentioned, the story that I wrote, because she promised three things, right? The universal background checks, red flag laws, and an assault weapons ban. And these are all things that Biden was already running on. And really, Biden has centered the gun side of his campaign around an assault weapons ban. And they've been talking about it, and she's continuing to talk about it. So that does draw a bit of a contrast with where the Republicans are at right now, where Trump and the Republicans are at, where they don't want to talk about gun policy, or at least they haven't in the last couple of weeks, at least going back to the NRA annual meeting in May. They haven't really made the guns a top issue for them, and they've kind of gone silent on it. But Democrats, on the other hand, Biden and now Harris, have doubled down on their support for more restrictions, including an assault weapons ban, which, that's obviously a political term that's kind of squishy as to what it means. But obviously it targets things like the AR-15, which is the most popular rifle in the country, but also
25 million of those floating around, I think, something like
right.
that.
Right. So a ban on the sale of those is pretty significant. Now, Harris in the primary campaign in 2020 had wanted a mandatory buyback. She supported mandatory buyback, which is just, essentially confiscation. You'd be forced to sell your ARs and other affected firearms back to the government, or to the government. You didn't buy them from the government. I know people say this, it's true. Yeah, you don't buy your guns from the government, but they call these things buybacks for whatever reason. And Biden never quite got to that point. Biden's proposal during the campaign was a registration system on the NFA, sort of like what they did with pistol braces. And then, yes, Harris also called for implementing some kind of an assault weapons ban through executive order, which is something that Biden had criticized as unconstitutional, essentially. He said the president doesn't have the power to do that. And if you look at how the administration has unfolded with the two of them in there, it certainly seems like Harris has more or less capitulated, or I don't know, capitulate is not the right word. She's gone along with what Biden wanted, not the other way around, which is typical, right? The president and vice president. Vice president is not usually the one leading the policy side of things. It's usually the president, and he hasn't adopted the more extreme measures that she had wanted. They did do executive action on guns. We talked about it a number of times, the pistol brace ban, like I mentioned, but they haven't tried to do the assault weapons ban through executive order like Harris wanted. And so I think you've got two things to look at with the Harris campaign now is